Welcome back, my friends, to a special episode of TFT Hyperroll, where I'm going to take you through 20 tips and tricks that will help you climb to Hyper Tier this season. Some of these you might know, some of these might be new, who knows? But anyway, look, this channel's called Mission for Tuition because we are trying to raise money for our son's middle and high school tuition, not through donations, but just through views. So liking, commenting, subscribing, viewing the video really helps us out. With that said, let's get started with tip number 1. Opening Carousel. I like to try and find a champion that has an item that will work on that champion, either for them or as an item holder, such as a Ziggs with a needlessly large rod. Ezreal with just about anything because he's a scrap champion. If you're going for a tanky character, you want to try to get some type of tanky item, like this Yowie with a chest plate, or this Poppy with a Negatron cloak, easily build into tank items. Or you want to get an item that will work and build into something such as Twitch, where you can turn this into a Rage Blade. If you happen to get an opening carousel like this with spatulas, I would consider going for one of the reach traits that contains a craftable emblem. And I would also pick up a champion that has one of those traits, so you're kind of getting a jump on it. Now, you're not stuck with it because you can change it to anything as you go. And when I'm talking about reach traits, I'm talking about traits where there aren't enough champions with that trait to reach its highest level. But these are some you can create with a spatula. 8 Academy, despite the nerfs, remains incredibly strong. You want to do it if you get a chance. 8 Arcanus, also very, very strong, but only achievable with a spatula. 9 Chemtech is absolutely fantastic. And 8 Challengers, well, it's just OP when you hit that level with a good Kaisa. If you can get to 7 Syndicate with your Assassins, you're going to win, and even 5 Imperial is very, very strong, especially if you can get that Tyrant into a Socialite square. And in the rare event you start out with getting a Tacticians Crown, I would seriously consider trying to work 1 or 2 Colossus into your build, if it otherwise fits. You'll want to look at other factors, but it's a great way to work them in and not feel like you're losing your team size. But that brings me to my 4th tip, which is no matter what start you get and how clear it may look, do not try to force your build. What you want to do is tip number 5, which is buy out your entire first board. This is obviously just for Hyperroll where you can do it, but you're going to want to wait until after you see your first augment to make a decision in which direction your build is going to go. Which brings me into tip number 6, which is kind of a multi-part tip, but it's about what to pick up as your first augment. Your first choice is always going to be with what your board might be telling you. In this case, there were 2 Yordles, so small appeared. It's an easy choice. You grab so small. Or maybe your board's already trying to tell you something. You've got 2 academies. It gives you an academy heart. Go ahead and take it. Build into what's working. Now, if you don't have one that just automatically fits into what you're doing and you see Socialite Heart, I suggest picking it up. It gives you an empowered hex on the board immediately that you can put whoever's going to be your temporary or ultimately permanent carry into. Now, if absolutely none of that works out, I like to go with a healing augment. Either Celestial Blessing or Thrill of the Hunt will do. If you're completely stuck other than that, then you might want to pick up Exile if you're given that choice, because it'll give your characters a strong shield. Now for tip number 7, this is something that's pretty important to use, but I have to be honest and say that I don't always use it, and that's hotkeys. There are some that I use a lot and some that I tend to avoid. The D key will refresh your shop. That's one that I use a lot. The E key will automatically sell a champion. That one I tend to avoid because I have a very twitchy trigger finger and I have sold too many champions that I didn't want to. You can use 1 and 3 to cycle through the other teams and scout and see what they're doing. You can use W to deploy a champion onto the board or back onto your bench, and you can use F to buy XP. These are very useful and will help you save time if you master them, but you don't have to worry about all of them. I would personally suggest just focusing on the D key for refreshing and the 1 and 3 for scouting. But with that said, the more comfortable you get with the more hotkeys, the faster you're going to be able to get through and make better decisions. Tip number 8 is a neat little trick you definitely want to make use of. As soon as you see a Socialite champion, grab them, put them on, and learn where the hex is. This may be useful for you, or it may not be useful to you. You're not going to be sure until you test it out. But here's the important thing. It's the same for everyone. If you know where the spotlight is, and you see someone else has Socialite champions from scanning through them with the 1 and 3 keys I mentioned earlier, then you know where you might want to place a Zephyr or how you want to aim your Blitzcrank in order to pull their carry. Now sometimes the spotlight's going to be in exactly the position you want it to be to work with what's going to be your carry. And if that happens, I tend to find it's worth the risk. Let's be honest with one another. We're casual gamers here. We're not playing at the championship level. At this level, most people are not scanning through to find the perfect Zephyr spot or the absolutely perfect Blitz pull. So if you can get a Tyrant into a spotlight, go for it. You're gonna win. Tip number 10 is about early items and why. Any regular viewer to the channel knows I like to make Sunfire Cape early in the game. The reason is early matches tend to last longer, making it a highly effective item. You're more likely to set their entire team on fire as you have it early because there's enough time for everyone to get set on fire. But it's not the only potential early item. Consider an item like Rageblade that also benefits from long fights to be a good early item. Tip number 11 is about synergies and avoiding a mistake that I make all too often. Notice here I have 3 Arcanus and 3 Academy instead of 4 and 2. This is giving me a disadvantage as it's not maximizing my potential. Here I go with 4 Academy and 2 Arcanist. It's better for me to get the additional buff on one of my traits than to have a little bit of each trait. Ultimately, it'll make the match a little bit easier and make it more likely for you to win. For tip number 12, just like you want to find out where the spotlight is, if you get a chance, find out what the Mutant trait is. It might work really well into different synergies. Notice that this one gives a chance to launch additional attacks. That works really, really well with Twin Shot. Now obviously you don't want to try and force it. You want your other champions and augments to work into it. But if you happen to get that trait or know that it's there and then get the chance for a Mutant emblem onto an Urgot in a Twin Shot build, clearly you want to go for it. Or you might get the Mutant trait where the champions grow throughout the match. If you get one like that, you might want to consider working into a giant show build. But again, you want to see what the game does. It doesn't always work out exactly the way you want it to. Do not force it. But if you do get a chance to create a chemical show like this, do it. It's a lot of fun. And he gets really, really big and loves eating things. Remember how last season Teemos equaled money? This season, having Yordles equals money. You can go Yordles early as a way of generating a little extra gold that you can use later on. You don't have to be going Yordles to make use of the Yordle trait early in the game. And speaking of Yordles, if you decide to actually go Yordles and get the chance to grab a loaded dice, you definitely want to do it. But there is a specific Yordle you want to use it on, and that would be Lulu. All of her other choices are very high-cost champions, which aren't bad, but you're most likely to just get a board full of Yordles. And who in their right mind could say no to a board full of Yordles? For our next tip, consider that most of your carries are in the 3 to 4 cost range. Your best chance of rolling 3s is 35%, which is in stage 6 and stage 7, and you have a fairly good chance of rolling 4s in stage 7, which is 15%. So I like to save as much money as possible until stage 7, where I can then roll down and find my carries or finish filling them out. With that said, I can't stress the importance enough of using item holders. You do not want to have a bunch of items sitting on the sideline throughout the game. You use characters who are similar in nature in order to hold items for your eventual carry. For example, in this case, I use Twisted Fate, who is also an Arcanist, to hold items for Lux, who would come in later to clean up. Now, it doesn't always have to be one of the exact same type. In this case, I ended up using Graves to hold items for Lux because he would make use of those items, but obviously they were much better on Lux, and so I could take them, put them on her, and ultimately win this match. The important thing to keep in mind is where you see your build going and who might be your carry. Then you know what items to pick up and then who you're looking for and when to switch items over. It's critical. Even though this Kog'Maw ends up getting killed, he does enough damage to weaken their team so that I can win this fight and stay alive, all the way up until the point that I'm able to pick up a Jinx and then switch the items that were onto Kog'Maw over to Jinx, and then ultimately win this match. This was my twin sister build that I did a video on some time ago. But please don't let item components just gather on your shelf. Use them. Speaking of items, it is important to know that the Hextech Gunblade has changed this season and operates more like the Radiant version did last season. It's going to heal your champion with the lowest health. Watch as Malzahar casts, he's going to be generating health to the character who has the lowest health on the board. This can help keep your team alive through fights that you wouldn't have otherwise thought you were going to win. You do want to use this item, but especially on champions who cast often and or with long durations. Malzahar is a good example of a long duration, as his cast causes damage over time, which results in health over time going back to another champion. Ultimately, I find using it very effective on any champion that casts often and with a lot of power. It can be Lux in any of her potential item holders, or even Vex is a good choice. It will help keep your team alive to win. Tip 19 came courtesy of our very own Lizzie, who suggested that if you are doing an Innovator build, and once you get Seraphine and have your Spotlight, put Mr. Roboto into the Spotlight. This avoids any chance of a Blitzcrank pull hitting your carry or a Zephyr, and also powers up your robot so that it's extra strong when attacking the opposing team. I've found it very effective in my games, and I think you will too. And now finally for tip number 20, which is probably the most important one of all. You need to have a friend at Riot. If you want a gold Kog'Maw to finish out your twin shot build, you call your friend at Riot. If you want a Yone that is going to absolutely tear apart the competition, look, you just pick up the phone, call your friend at Riot and say, hey, I need a Yone that's going to be unstoppable. It's really not that difficult. And look, if you made it this far in the video, you too deserve to have a friend at Riot who can help you out and give you impossible builds like this one. And so, well, I'm going to share Gary's information with you. It's right there on the screen. If you need help, if you want to get like the perfect build and set yourself up, you want that 7 Innovator, 6 Scrap, absolutely impossible combination, and you want a gold Ezreal just the moment you need it, give Gary a call. He'll help you out. He's helped me out all this time. I'm sure he'll help out other supporters of the channel. And soon you'll be seeing this. Hope you enjoyed the video and have an absolutely awesome day.